Every 2 years, Nevada voters head to the polls to cast their ballots for important offices, but voters also have a chance to weigh in on key issues through ballot questions. Everything from same-sex marriage to energy policy to minimum wage to other policy topics. Ballot questions don't appear by accident. The process to get an initiative in front of voters is a years-long process that requires either legislative action or the gathering of hundreds of thousands of signatures. Although they appear on the ballot in numerical order, there are actually 3 types of ballot questions: constitutional initiatives, which amend the state's constitution, statutory initiatives, which change a state law, and referendums, which are up or down votes on a specific state law. There are 2 paths used to get a question on the ballot in Nevada: approval in 2 subsequent legislative sessions for a proposed change to the state constitution, or gathering enough signatures throughout the state to qualify. This applies to all 3 types of ballot questions. Let's start with how to amend the state constitution. The first method is through a resolution brought up by state lawmakers during a legislative session, which has to be heard and approved by both chambers of the legislature in subsequent legislative sessions. If that happens, the resolution then goes to the next general election ballot. This process usually takes a long time because the legislature only meets every 2 years, but it can be sped up if lawmakers pass a constitutional resolution during a special legislative session. That's when lawmakers meet outside the normal 120-day period in which they meet normally every other year. And that's what happened with the 3 proposed mining tax constitutional changes in the 2020 special session, a decision made to speed up the usual 5-year process. Constitutional initiatives can also be started by signature gathering. Those requirements are the same for all 3 kinds of ballot questions. Supporters have to obtain signatures of at least 10% of registered voters who cast a ballot in the last election, with minimum requirements for collecting signatures throughout all 4 of the state's congressional districts. Nevada is unique among states in requiring that any voter-initiated constitutional change has to be passed in 2 subsequent elections. Voter opinion can swing widely between election cycles. A proposed constitutional amendment moving Nevada to a retail electric market passed with 72% of the vote in 2016, but then failed 2 years later when nearly 2/3 of voters opposed it. Next, statutory initiatives, which are changes or modifications to state law. They're easier to qualify than constitutional changes, but don't have the same lasting effect as a change to the Constitution. As mentioned before, statutory initiatives start their life cycle through the signature gathering process. If they get enough signatures, they're sent to the next regular session of the legislature, where lawmakers have a choice. They're given 40 days to either approve the initiative, reject it, take no action, or propose an alternative that will go before voters in the next election along with the original one. So there would be 2 similar questions on the ballot. Essentially, unless lawmakers approve it during the legislative session, statutory initiatives head to the next general election ballot. Unlike constitutional amendments, statutory initiatives only have to pass once, but lawmakers are prohibited from making any changes to the new or amended state law for a 3-year period. Referendums, which ask voters to repeal part of a previously approved state law, are somewhat rarer and similar to statutory initiatives. They only come through the signature gathering process. Qualified referendums head straight to the ballot, no pit stop at the legislature, where the decision made by voters has major consequences. Approving a referendum means that the law in question is rendered void, but a failed referendum locks in the specific state law, meaning it can only ever be modified or changed through a direct vote of the people and not by just the legislature. So even if the question for voters is simple, a yes or no, the actual process of getting to the ballot is a lot more complicated. For video explainers and more on past and future ballot questions, bookmark thenevadaindependent.com.